How do you stay objective in that situation as a journalist?
Well, I think it begins with the answer that no journalist can be totally objective, totally unbiased, every day, in every way, on every story. That the test of a journalist of integrity is over a reasonable length of time, how hard does he or she try to keep their own biases out, and how do they succeed? The critical point comes, and you've touched on it, when, as a journalist, you see something happening, you say to yourself, you know what, I'm a journalist, but I'm an American, I'm a citizen, I'm a father, I'm a brother, and this is outrageous, this is not compatible with my conscience. That's the test point of you're trying to stay objective and try to stay unbiased. But, you know, as a lifetime journalist, I can say, I can only speak for myself, you do the best you can, realizing you're going to make your mistakes. But sort of prizing those moments when you have said to yourself, you know, I've got to quit saying that I'm going to deal in false equivalency. It's one of the great dangers of journalism, false equivalency. Well, there's just as many voices on this side as there are on this. Giving airtime to mass shooters is something that journalists, for the length and breadth of my career, long before we got into this most recent run of school shootings, as far back as the 60s and 70s, for example, the Kennedy assassination, how much attention to give Lee Harvey Oswald. This is an ongoing conversation with journalists for which we haven't come up with an answer. There is something to be said, I do think, for individual journalists' conscience. Just rather than just wait for the station manager or the network head to say, we have a new policy about mass shooters. We're going to show the picture of the shooter once and only once. We're going to mention his name only 3 times, and that's going to be it. These kinds of ethical standards put into print or trying to standardize the approach in the past haven't worked very well. So there's something said for an individual journalist to say, you know, on my program or on my beat, with a mass shooter, I'll mention his name once and then move on. Or on my program, I'm not going to show his picture. Now, you may catch hell from the news director or the station manager or the network owner, but that kind of individual responsibility is probably the best we can hope for. And that when one does it, another may notice kind of quietly, you know, David is not putting on his program the shooter. I don't want to raise any false expectations, because the competitive drive, yes, for ratings and audience and subscription, usually carries the day in news. Now, as for giving airtime to mass shooters, I do feel strongly about this. This is something that needs to be addressed quite quickly. That I take a back seat to no man or woman in wanting to break stories. You know, part of my job is to be a story hunter, be a story breaker, as well as a storyteller. But there is a time, again, when conscience has to dictate. And giving airtime, unless it's part of a concentrated effort by those, for say, in a hostage situation, or the mass shooter is holed up somewhere, and someone in law enforcement said, listen, we need to keep him talking. That's a different situation. I'm afraid I haven't answered your question all too well, but you know, there are some questions of professional ethics and standards and your own conscience, which you just have to keep reviewing in your own head from time to time.